to Module 2 of the Sanitation Safety Planning methodology. My name is Leonela Barreto Dillon and I will be your guide in this module called Describe the Sanitation System. Here we will be answering the following two questions. What is the system and who is at risk? Within this module we will map the system, characterize the waste fractions, identify potential exposure groups, gather compliance and contextual information, and validate the system description. The main objective is to generate a complete description of the sanitation system within the boundaries identified in Module 1. Let's start with Module 2.1, Map the System. The aim of this module is to understand the source and path of the waste through the system. Each element of the sanitation chain needs to be considered, from toilet, containment, storage, treatment, conveyance, treatment, and end-use disposal. Chapter 3 of the 2018 WHO Guidelines offers a detailed description of safe sanitation systems. According to it, sanitation systems are a combination of technologies and services that, when linked and properly managed, can form a safe chain. The steps of a sanitation system are: toilet. This is the user interface with the sanitation system, where excreta are captured and can incorporate any type of toilet seat or latrine slab, pedestal, pan, or urinal. Examples are dry toilet and flush toilets. Containment, storage, and treatment. This is only relevant to non-sewer sanitation systems and refers to the container, usually located below ground level, to which the toilet is connected. Examples are ventilated improved pits or septic tanks. Conveyance. It refers to the movement of wastewater or fecal sludge from a containment technology to off-site treatment and end-use or disposal. It could be sewers or transportation with trucks. Treatment. It refers to the processes that changes the physical, chemical, and biological characteristics or composition of fecal sludge or wastewater, so it is of a quality that is fit for purpose for the intended next use or disposal. This includes technologies to treat wastewater and fecal sludge on-site and off-site. Reuse or disposal. It refers to technologies and methods by which treatment products are ultimately discharged into the environment, either as an end-use product or reduced risk material, for instance, irrigation. The method chosen for mapping will depend on the scale and complexity of the sanitation system. For some projects, it might be useful to map using a system flow diagram, which tracks the path of all fraction of the waste. Here, for instance, we have a sanitation system of a city with an on-site sanitation system. Here you can see how the whole sanitation system is described. We have the toilet, containment, storage, treatment, conveyance, treatment, and reuse and disposal. Another method to map the system is a system process diagram, which uses the standard process flow symbols. Here you can see an urban wastewater system and an on-site septic system. Where the SSP boundary covers a community or catchment, a geographical map might be more helpful. Choose the method with what your team is more comfortable to work with. You can also use a combination of the different methods. It is important to ensure that site visits are conducted, so the mapping is accurate and not simple a desk-based exercise. make sure that you conduct site visits. Once the map of the system is ready, you should establish the path of different waste fractions through the sanitation system. In this case, you see an example for an on-site system. All different fractions are marked in the map. For instance, here we are showing the fecal sludge collected in septic tanks and the liquid fraction that percolates from the septic tanks, among other waste fractions. You should record available quantitative information about the waste streams, such as flow rates and the design capacity of each treatment element. In Model 2.2, we characterize the microbiological, physical, and chemical constituents of the waste fractions. A hazard is defined as a biological, chemical, or physical constituent that can cause harm to human health. Biological hazards are microbial pathogens such as bacteria, parasitic protozoa and viruses, helminths, and vector-borne pathogens. Chemical hazards are heavy metals in sludge or biosolids from industrial sources, herbicides and pesticides. Physical hazards are sharps like needles, odors, or physical injuries to workers like falling. Now that we understand the potential health hazards, we can characterize the composition of the waste fractions. This table that you find in your SSP manual indicates what are the potential health hazards associated to the waste fractions. For instance, domestic wastewater potentially presents biological hazards such as viruses, bacteria, protozoa, helminths, and vector-related diseases. It can also contain physical hazards such as sharp objects, inorganic materials, and odors. Here you can see how the characterization was done for some of the waste fractions identified in our example. Now it is time to start with Module 2.3. Here we identify the people who are in each step of the sanitation system, so we can obtain an initial classification of exposed groups and identify how the exposure occurs. Exposure groups are people who might be exposed to sanitation-related health hazards. This could be sanitation system users, all people who uses a toilet, workers, a person who is responsible for maintaining, cleaning, operating, or emptying the sanitation technology, local community, anyone who is living near the sanitation technology or farm in which the material is used and might be affected, farmers, a person who is using the sanitation products such as untreated, partially treated, or fully treated wastewater, biosolids, or fecal sludge. Consumers, anyone who consumes products like vegetables or fish that are produced using sanitation products. And wider community, a wider population like lower-lying communities who might be exposed to hazards. Let's see this example of identification of exposure groups. Notice that we already can identify users, sanitation workers, local communities, farmers, consumers, and wider community. We just identified and characterized the waste fractions. This tells us the potential health hazards. Now we want to look closer to reality. What helps us identify the relevant health hazards. In Model 2.4, we gather evidence of really what are the health risks to which our exposure groups are exposed. For this, we collect and document information about the context, means the reality, in which the sanitation system exists. When putting together compliance and contextual information, our SSP manual lists out examples of data to be collated. These are regulatory requirements such as relevant law and bylaws, effluent discharge regulations, guidelines for climate change preparedness or disaster planning. You also should gather information related to system management and performance. This should provide supporting documentation related to the enforcement of regulations listed before. You should gather data related to earlier monitoring and surveillance, epidemiological data, types and amounts of products produced. To obtain information on the presence or absence of a specific disease or pathogen, a desk literature review may give sufficient information. Information can also be obtained from public health authorities, which have access to the routine health information system. Consultation of personnel working in health facilities within or in the proximity to the study area is also a useful way to obtain the information required. Don't forget to collect information about demographics and land use patterns, such as land use patterns, population, and special activities that might impact the sanitation system, formal and informal settlements, specific considerations such as ethnicity, religion, migrant populations, and disadvantaged groups. And finally, we should collect information about changes related to climate and seasonal conditions. These include, for instance, seasonal variation of use of wastewater due to type of crops or type of harvest, seasonal crop and harvest data, additional inflow areas during heavy rains and implications on treatment steps, and climate change projections. You will find that in some cases, information is not available. So the steering committee should consider if primary information needs to be gathered. In all cases, the information that the SSP team will have to produce will depend on what type of information is really needed, what data is available, what resources are available to collect new data, and what is the actual objective of SSP. Because models 2.1 and 2.4 are probably mainly a desk exercise, we need to carry out model 2.5 to get out of the office and validate if the system description is complete and accurate. There are a number of methods to conduct field investigations, such as sanitary inspections and surveillance, transect walks, focus groups discussions, key informant interviews, and collection of samples for laboratory testing. Great! So we have now completed Module 2 of the SSP methodology, Describe the Sanitation System. You have learned how to map the system, characterize the waste fractions, identify potential exposure groups, gather compliance and contextual information, and validate the system description. I recommend downloading the 2018 WHO guidelines and learn more about pathogenic hazards in Chapter 6. Also, you should carefully read Module 2 of your SSP manual, especially the guidance notes 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7 on compiling biological, chemical, and physical hazard information. In the following lecture, we will continue with the Sanitation Safety Planning methodology, and specific Module 3, Identify hazardous events, assess existing control measures, and exposure risks. Thanks for watching and happy SSP!